The word of the week this week comes from friend of the channel, Sammy Airlines. And Sammy asked for some clarity regarding Matthew chapter 16, verses 16 through 18, concerning the phrase, "On this rock I will build my church." Specifically, he wants to know, does "on this rock" refer to Peter or to his confession, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God"? It's a great question, and it has multiple answers, or at least a multi-part answer, that are both simple and complex. And we're going to pick it apart today in detail. And let us begin by establishing the context, looking at Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 through 16. This is from the ESV. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Then Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So in Mark chapter 14, verse 61, the high priest asks Jesus, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus replies, "I am." That's the closest sort of synoptic to what we're looking at here. But in Matthew's account, there is no high priest involved. Jesus is talking specifically to his disciples. And let's look in Koine at who replied. Apokryphes de Simon Petros apen. So Apokryphes answered, or answering, de, and Simon Petros, Simon Rock, Simon Peter, Simon Rock, apen said, Su e ho Christos, ho huios tu theu tu zontas. Su e, you are, ho Christos, the Christ, ho huios tu theu, the Son of God, tu zontos, the living one, the Son of the living God. So did you notice who answered? We're told that Simon Peter answered. Actually, Simon Rock answered. So he's called Simon Peter here in the ESV before Jesus called him, said, "You are Peter, and on this rock I'll build my church." It leaves us with two possibilities. Either Petros was already Simon's nickname, or by the time that this was written, by the time that Matthew wrote his gospel, Petros was a commonly known nickname for the disciple Simon, the fisherman. But here's what we know as a fact. In John chapter 1, verse 42, make yourself a note, John chapter 1, verse 42, Jesus refers to Simon as Kephas. And Kephas is a Greek transliteration of the Aramaic Kepha. And Kepha means rock. So when Jesus calls him Petros here in this story, when Matthew calls him Petros, and answering, Simon Rock said, he's using a Greek translation of the Greek transliteration from the Aramaic Kepha, rock. So what is Simon's nickname from Jesus? It's rock. Whether the Aramaic Kepha, whether the transliterated into Greek Kephas, Cephas, or whether it's translated to the Greek itself, Petros, rock. And Simon Rock answering said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So let's move on and get closer to our word of the week. This is verse 17. And Jesus answered, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Yona, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." So notice that here Jesus calls him by his earthly family name, his flesh and blood name. Simon, son of Jonah. Simon Bar-Yona, the son of Jonah. And then he tells him, flesh and blood, you don't get this because of your earthly parentage. In fact, this was revealed to you by my Father in heaven, my heavenly Father revealed to you that I am in fact the Christ, the Son of the living God. So that brings us to the big stuff. Let's get to verse 18. And I tell you, you are Peter, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So let's look at it in Koine. Sue Petros, you are rock. Now, it's easy to want to translate it Peter because all of our lifetimes, every English translation has had Peter. But the key for us to keep in mind is Petros means rock, and we translate Greek words to English, right? Even when they're names, we turn them into a more English-sounding name. But the key here is, at the time of this writing, Petros is not a proper name. It is not the name Peter. The name Peter doesn't exist. It is the word rock, masculinized, applied to a man from the Greek word Petra, rock. So hold that in your mind, hang on to it, it's critically important, and let us carry on. Sue Petros, you are rock, kai epi taute te Petra, and upon, kai epi and upon, taute this, te Petra, rock, and upon this rock, oikodomeso, I shall build. This is a future active indicative first person singular form of the verb. I shall build in the future, my, tein ekklesion, church. So you are rock or a rock, and upon this rock I shall build my church. Now there's an authenticity problem with this verse. Commentators have struggled for centuries over the fact that Jesus here is purported by Matthew to be talking about some future building of an entity or an organization called his church. If you read all of his teachings in all four of the Gospels, this is wildly inconsistent with the thrust of Jesus' message. The notion that he had an intention to build an organization or an entity, particularly something called tein ekklesion, the called out ones, the called out thing, called out of Judaism, called out of the world, we're not told specifically, but this is wildly inconsistent with his message today. But that is not our topic for today. That's a subject for you to pursue on your own. Let's get to our words of the week. So, hey Petra. Notice I usually don't put the articles in front of our words when they're nouns for the words of the week, but I've done it here because it's important for us to distinguish that hey Petra is a feminine noun. We know that because of the hey article and also the ending, the alpha ending. It is a feminine noun and it means rock, but it means a large rock, like a cliff face or bedrock. And it's in opposition to the word lithos, like lithography or Paleolithic, the Stone Age, right? And a lithos tends to be more of a portable rock, a movable rock, whereas Petra is serious, major bedrock, cliff face, a serious chunk of stone. Our other word is hopetros. Hopetros is a masculinized noun that at the time of the writing of Matthew's gospel, at the time of the writing of the whole New Testament, is a nickname that is applied to specifically this fisherman named Simon, Simon bar Yonah, Simon son of Jonah. And it means rock. Why does it mean rock? Because it is a masculinized form of Petra, and Petra means rock. So why is it masculinized? Because we're applying it to a man. So if you take this noun and turn it into a substantive, a nickname. We're going to, instead of calling him Simon, we're going to call him Petros. But Petros doesn't mean Peter because the name Peter doesn't exist yet. Petros means rock. So in John chapter 1, Jesus meets this fisherman and he says, this guy here is a rock. This guy is Kepha, rock, Kephas, Cephas, Petros, because it's masculinized form of Petra. So every time that we read that verse and it says, you are Peter, we should be thinking you are rock, because Peter means rock, and we translate Greek words into English. We don't simply transliterate them and turn them into an English name, Peter. You and I have all known people named Peter, but the reason the name Peter exists is because Jesus referred to Simon Bar-Yona, known as Kephas, as Petros, the masculinized form of Peter, and it stuck and became the masculinized form of Petra, and it stuck and became the name Peter. Okay? I know that's a long winding trip around and around the mulberry bush here, but this is important. Sue Petros is not saying you are Peter, it's saying you are rock, because Petros is a masculinized form of Petra and means rock. So, some Protestants have tried to take Petros and equate it with lithos and say, well, see, he's not saying that you are rock and on this rock I will build my church. He's not saying that, because Petros means a little rock and Petra means bedrock or a cliff face or a big solid unmovable rock. But the thing is, if you go back and research the etymology of Petros, you find that it's not a word that has any significant use prior to being applied to this guy Simon the fisherman. So that is a cop-out to try and backfill the notion that Jesus can't possibly be saying, you are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. Because for some people, particularly Protestants, that's an uncomfortable notion, because from that, it's a short trip to apostolic succession and a chain of popes beginning with Peter all the way down to Francis today in 2024. But we'll unpack some of that further as we go on. But linguistically, it's important to know that there is no equation between Petros and lithos. Okay? Petros, again, simply the masculinization of Petra. That's all it is. So, the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, uses Petra a lot to describe rocks. And specifically, the most noteworthy one is Moses in the wilderness speaking to the rock and drawing forth water, and later striking it with his staff to draw forth water. The rock in question is Petra. And in 1 Corinthians, Paul then speaks of that same rock being a symbol for Jesus as the one that brings, slakes the thirst of those who are in the wilderness, etc. So this word Petra has a lot of Septuagint use. Petros does not. Why? Because Petros is a masculinization of Petra and is a nickname given to a guy named Simon, who was a boisterous and loud fisherman who burst forth with his excited utterance, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So let's talk about rock as being applied to a person prior to Jesus calling Simon Kephas, Petros. In some rabbinical teaching, pre-Christian rabbinical teaching, in a thing called Jalkut or Yalkut number 1, line number 766, we read this: "When God looked on Abraham, who was to arise, he said, 'Lo, I have found a rock on which I can build the world. For this reason, he called Abraham a rock. So in a sense, in Jewish teaching, in Jewish understanding, pre-Christian Jewish understanding, Abraham is the foundational Jew, okay? And here in Matthew's gospel, the most Jewish of the four gospels, Matthew gives us a story in which Jesus identifies Simon the fisherman as what could be understood as kind of the foundational Christian. What makes him such? Is it his character? Is it his personality? Is it his loudness? Is it his prowess in fishing? Is it his leadership skills? It is, in the context of the story, it is the utterance, the revelation that came to him from Jesus' Father in heaven. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Those who see and understand Jesus as the Christ are at the foundation of Christianity, right? So interestingly, there is a precedent for a sort of an archetypical foundational person to be described as a rock. Abraham in Judaism, the foundation of the world that God is building, and here Simon as Petros, rock, the foundation of Christianity, based on his understanding that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Let's go back and look at the grammar a little more closely. Sue Petros, you are rock, or you could say you are a rock. Kai epitaute, and upon this what? Te Petra, this rock, Petros and Petra, oikodomeso, I shall build my tain ecclesian, church. If you object to Peter as the foundation upon which Jesus will build his church, you may make this argument. Linguistically, you may make this argument. Petros is masculine, and the phrase kai epi taute te Petra is feminine. And you can't have, because things are supposed to agree in case, gender, number, and you can't have the masculine and the feminine being the same referent. And in many cases, I would say, hey, that's a great point. Petros is masculine, Petra is feminine. But what you have to stop and consider is that etymology of Petros, and that it is simply the masculinization of Petra. It doesn't pre-exist this experience as a standalone noun that is the proper name Peter. It just doesn't. It doesn't pre-exist it as a different kind of rock. It just doesn't. So Petros is rock. Petra is rock. So what the verse says linguistically is, you are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church. Very, very important. But let us carry on and look at another possible grammatical objection. The second objection may be, tauta te Petra, this rock, is a reference back to what Simon said, that declaration, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. The problem with that is, I don't disagree with that as a concept. The problem with that is, linguistically, why make such a confusing statement right after saying, Sue Petros, you are rock? If you wanted to make that point, you are rock, but upon the thing that you said, I will build my church, upon the revelation that you got from my Father in heaven, I will build my church. He could have simply said, Sue Petros, you are rock, and upon this truth, upon this word, upon this saying of yours, upon this revelation from my Father in heaven. He could have said any or all of those things, but instead he said, Sue Petros, you are rock, kai epi taute te Petra, and upon this rock, you are rock, upon this rock, I will build my church. He had the opportunity, the language is readily available to say, I want to differentiate from Petros to the thing that Petros said. But he doesn't do that. He leaves us with the pun. He leaves us with the wordplay. He deliberately, either Jesus or Matthew, deliberately employs that wordplay. So in general, the existence of Petros and Petra in the same sentence, within the same context, would lead us to believe linguistically that it's a single referent. The Petros of Sue Petros, the rock, you are rock, is linguistically almost certainly the same rock when he says, and upon this rock I will build my church. That is the natural linguistic conclusion based on the etymology, based on the construction, based on there not being any intervening text to point us to something different. And it's also thematically consistent with the idea that a person could be nicknamed or could be sort of euphemized, euphemistically referred to as a rock, as a foundational person. Abe is the foundation upon which God will build the world, and Peter and people like Peter who receive the revelation that Jesus is the Christ are the foundation upon which he will build his church. That makes sense. None of that speaks to or requires the assumption of an apostolic succession of popes down through from Peter all the way to Francis. So if that's the concern, none of this speaks to that. It's up to you to go find other support for that. But there's one more thing for us to look at linguistically, and it's in verses 18 and 19. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock, let me reread that. And I tell you, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you, soy, to you, singular. This is dative, masculine, singular. The keys of the kingdom of heaven. And whatever you bind, literally whatever you should bind, deses, second person singular, on earth shall be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose, whatever you should loose, luces, second person singular, on earth shall be loosed in heaven. All the references are singular. The keys that are given to you singular. The binding and the loosing are things that you singular might do. So the referent here is almost certainly to that singular person, Simon Bar-Yona, Simon Petros, Simon Rock, Sue Petros, you are rock, and upon this rock, Taute te Petra, upon this rock I will build my church. The keys are given to an individual. The individual is going to make the decision. But if the individual is the stand-in, is the foundational Christian, and is the archetype of those who recognize that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, we're not talking about him as being the only and evermore or the first of a succession. We're talking about him in an archetypical fashion. Perhaps, up to you to decide that. Sammy, to your question, the verse, in the linguistics of the verse, the two uses of Petros and Petra are almost certainly referring to the same thing, the person, Simon Bar-Yona, Simon the fisherman. Almost certainly referring to the same thing. It would take an awful lot of arguing to convince me otherwise, because there's no evidence, or there's at best very, very scant evidence for the term Petros to ever be applied as a proper name prior to this, or to be seen as something distinct from Petra. It's just the masculinization of Petra because it's being applied to a male. within the context, let me go back before I go to the context. There's no claim, explicit or implicit, in the passage for an apostolic succession through a chain of vicars of Christ. Or there's no claim, nor is there any claim, that Peter is going to be the leader of Christianity, either de facto or titular. And if you read the book of Acts and if you read the rest of the epistles, there's no evidence that Peter functioned as the leader of Christianity after Christ ascends to heaven. There are multiple leaders. James is in charge in Jerusalem, and Paul is the apostle to the Gentiles by and large. And we know that Timothy becomes the bishop of Ephesus. And there are people engaging in leadership functions all around, and it's a diffuse leadership. And nowhere do we see, we do see Peter as a leading light. We see Paul seek him out after his conversion and spends a couple weeks with him. But we do not see Peter, Simon, Cephas, Rock functioning as the head of the church. It's just not the case. Let's go on to context. What is the thing in the context of the story that makes Peter the standout? It's the thing that he said. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's the important part of the story. That's why Jesus recognizes something special with Simon, right? Not because of his leadership skills, his character, his loud mouth, his water walking experience. That's not why. It's because his Father in heaven has revealed this important thing to Simon. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. So, our words of the week: hey Petra, the feminine noun, rock, a big, bold, bedrock, cliff face, immovable, massive thing, as opposed to lithos. And our other one, hopetros, not the name Peter, that came as a result of this story, but a masculinized form of Petra, simply meaning rock, a nickname given to Simon by Jesus. Hope that was helpful, Sammy. I hope everyone found some value in that. I know it was long, it's complicated, but there's so much here, and there's so much sort of invested in it from the Catholic and Orthodox and Protestant worlds of what we read into and out of this passage, that I didn't want to give it short shrift. Sammy, I hope people will go to your YouTube channel, Sammy Airlines 9307 is his username, and see some really interesting videos about telescopes and photography. If you found this video helpful, you know all the YouTubey things to do, the liking and the sharing. And until next time, Charis Kairini Humin, grace and peace to you.